Hi, Hiltonian here. Just wanted to share with you a couple of things that I've been building lately. I was thinking about the problem we all have right now in that we'd like to have conversations with friends of ours and family, but with the COVID epidemic going on, you really should do that outdoors. But it's February, so how do you have a conversation with a friend or a loved one outdoors without freezing your fiddly bits off? I think I've got at least a partial answer to that, one of which is standing right behind me here. Oh, by the way, I do have eyeballs. It's just that it's very bright out, and if I didn't wear these, I'd end up looking like that old guy from Kung Fu, you know? So, anyways, what I have for you is the Hiltonian Conversational Reflector Mark I, and I'll also show you Mark II and Mark III. So what's the basic principle? It's not that complicated. It's a parabola. This is just a plywood parabola cut out of 1/2-inch AC plywood. And for those of you who have forgotten your high school mathematics, a parabola is a curve that focuses anything incoming onto a single point, the focus. And in this case, this curve, the focus is about a foot forward from the back of it. So what is this made out of? This is your basic survival blanket. You can see it's all reflective on the front. It's green nylon on the back. Choose your own color. And it's held in a roughly parabolic shape by these two plywood parabolas cut out of the 1/2-inch, about 3 inches wide, with holes drilled in them. And this is what's called EMT, electrical metallic tubing, I think. It's electrical conduit, and these are what's called male threaded fittings or male threaded adapters, and it's basically just a little thread with a ring nut and a piece of tube that fits over the conduit. So I cut the parabolas with a jigsaw, laid them out, and I'll get into the layout later. But I laid them out, cut them with a jigsaw, drilled them one right on top of the other so it would all be the same, put in the fittings, glued the fittings in place so they wouldn't break out, and then put the pieces of EMT in. I believe these were like 52 inches long because the blanket was 54, I think. And then stapled and glued the blanket onto each piece of plywood. So what you end up with is this parabolic reflector that does a pretty good job of focusing heat on you. So if you take two of these, and I got another one, and you put them about 8 or 10 feet apart, and you put a fire pit in between, it reflects the heat that would otherwise just go past you back onto you. So you avoid that face frying, ass freezing effect that you get around a campfire. So this is another conversational reflector, the Mark III version. Now I know what you're thinking, what happened to Mark II? That's the Mark I, this is the Mark III. The Mark II is exactly the same as this, except I used thicker material. And then I said, I don't need it to be so thick, so I cut it down a little bit. The other one was made with 2x4s, this is made with 2x2s. But anyways, this, I'm gonna get out a shot and show you some of the features of it, but this is made out of the same kind of plywood parabolas plus 2x4s as framework, and then it's faced with aluminum flashing, 20-inch wide aluminum flashing like you can get at any lumber supply place, and then it is faced again over that with 2mm reflective mylar, which is really, as you can see, is brilliantly reflective. And this is a much more accurate parabola than the Mark I, and I'll show you the slight risk of that, in that this is about 2,500 watts of sunlight being reflected on a line about an inch wide. And I put my glove in there and it started smoking. So this one you probably shouldn't aim straight south. Actually, this piece of Trex stuff is actually smelling a little bit. I think it's torching up. But anyways, the additional advantage of the Mark II and Mark III versions of plywood and aluminum is that they reflect sound as well. So you can be 10, 12 feet away from somebody and still hear them. If you're sitting right in the, I better not sit right in the focus there, that's pretty bright. But if you're sitting right in the focus, you can hear sounds from far off really well. So you get the dual problem of solving cold and distant. Cold and distant. I've had relationships like that. But anyways, let me get off camera and show you the framework of this particular one. But you can see it's brilliantly reflective. So I changed my mind. I'm going to stay on camera so I can point at things. So here's the framework of the Mark III or Mark II. It's those same 1/2-inch plywood parabolas cut out with a jigsaw. In this case, in the Mark III case, I had made them for the Mark II with 2x4s, and these were 3.5 inches wide. But it seemed like overkill, and I couldn't get all the parabola curves I wanted to out of one sheet of plywood. So I thought, this is good enough. I'll split 2x4s in half and make it half thickness. And so I did that, and then I stacked them all up as I cut them out, and I left the excess there because why not? So you can see this is just 2x4s, a couple of screws here, a couple of screws there, and some of that, I used Gorilla Glue, but Elmer's makes the same kind. It's that maple syrup covered glue that foams up. You dampen the wood or whatever, and it foams up, and it does a pretty good job of gluing the aluminum to the plywood and the plywood to the 2x4 and all that. And what I did is I made a whole bunch of these parabolas and stacked them up and drilled through them with a 3/8-inch drill here and over there so that I could bolt them together. Now, you may ask, why didn't you just make it one big piece? Well, this stuff comes 20 inches wide. If you can find 24-inch wide stuff, that's fine, do it. I could find 20-inch wide, so I made 20-inch wide. So this was 19 inches long, 19-inch piece of 2x2. And so these two bolted together, so I built the frame, then I cut a 6-foot piece of this aluminum. I designed the parabola specifically, so it's 5 feet wide, and it uses a 6-foot piece of material to go across it, just to be nice and neat. And it has a 1-foot focal length, so you want to be 1 foot forward from the back of the parabola. So stapled and glued the aluminum on, and then spray glued the mylar on the other side. So 3 of these bolt together, 5 feet tall, 5 feet wide. Makes it a little more transportable as well. It's a little bit wobbly, but what you really need to look out for is the fact that it's like a big sail. you need to weight it down or stake it down. Sandbags, concrete blocks, something, because the wind will catch it. It's very light. There's not a lot to it, and it'll flip right over if you don't have it weighted down. Now, you will note that I am in no way Albert Einstein, right? Look at a picture of Albert Einstein, look at a picture of me, two different guys. I don't have the ultimate grasp on the truth of the universe. So if you look at this and you say, wow, I could substitute this for that, I could use that instead of this, I could make it this way instead of that, it would be better. Great. Maybe you can. I have no doubt you can. So if you start with just the fact that it's a big parabola, a big parabolic trough that can focus the heat of a fire pit at you, this could be thin plywood. You know, this could be thicker or thinner plywood. This could be some other material. What do you got? It's perfectly fine. This is not the be-all and end-all. So feel free to improvise. The main point is it's a parabola. It's 5 feet wide. It's 5 feet tall, so you can sit in front of it and have it above your head. It's got a rigid backing material, so it's a very good parabola. The Mark I's a little more crude. And so it's a rigid material, so it's a good parabola, and it also reflects sound, which is the other benefit. So yeah, you could get sheets of, you know, really thin plywood, and you could build one this tall all in one piece. You could frame in the back to make it look nicer. The next modification I'm thinking of is actually making a little sort of half roof on it, so it can reflect heat down on top of you as well, because you lose most of your heat through the top of your head, you know, when you're out and about. So that would be nice and comfortable to have that. So this is the basics of the construction. I'm not going to do one of those videos where, you know, the guy's sitting there with a jigsaw cutting everything out, because like either you know how to do that or you don't, right? But I'm going to also talk about the fire pit here in a moment. So here's your basic configuration of the Hiltonian Conversational Reflectors with a Mark I and a Mark III here, and a fire pit in the center. Not too complicated, but I'd like to show you what's up with the fire pit here, because what I found was that having a fire pit in between these two things ends up, well, you know, like the old song goes, the smoke gets in your eyes. But here is a what's known as a smokeless fire pit, and it's not super complex. You can buy these on eBay and Amazon for a couple $100, maybe less, but I chose to make one out of an old piece of propane tank. Safety note, always fill and empty the propane tank with compressed air about 10 times before cutting into it, just to avoid unpleasantness. But what it is if you look inside, there's some vent holes in the bottom, and then there are these pipes going up the side. Now, the ones they make commercially have two outside layers. They have an inside ring and an outside ring, and the air comes in holes on the outside and comes out holes on the inside, and it's super hot, so it combusts the smoke. In my case, I just used pieces of 1.25 inch pipe welded to the bottom. So there's a hole in the bottom, and then the 1.25 inch pipe, and then a tab at the top to deflect the air in on the fire. And what you get is, you know, 99% smoke-free, very flame-heavy fire. I'll maybe edit in a little bit of footage of that from a day or so ago. but this is a good kind of thing to have in between your two reflectors. Now, you can also use two electrical heaters, or two propane heaters, or two whatever kind of heaters you want, facing opposite directions, and you sitting there on your chair inside one reflector or another, staying toasty warm. I checked this out on another day with my Mark II and Mark III reflectors, and that fire in between, and it was probably, I don't know, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, -7 Celsius, and I was pretty cozy, actually, sitting at the focus of that parabola. So anyways, this is just a possibility for you, if you're handy with tools, to build something to keep you warm while you're chatting outside with your friends and loved ones. Hope you find it useful. I will post the design for the parabola itself down in the comments, or the down below, and I will maybe post a link to a location with more detailed plans. But anyways, I think this is pretty straightforward as it goes. You can put any questions in the comments. Anyways, so happy warm outdoors conversation, folks. Stay safe, and we'll ride this out together. Okay, so construction details, a little postscript on some of the things about how I put this stuff together. First detail on material, this is 2mm reflective mylar. You can get it on eBay, on Amazon, in rolls of 2 foot wide, 4 foot wide, 25, 50, 100 feet long. Usually it's used by people who are doing dope growing. But yeah, you can buy this stuff, shop around a little bit. There's a wide variety of prices on this stuff. But what I did originally was, hit that there. But anyways, I built the framework, faced it with the aluminum, bolted them all together, and then laid out a 4 foot wide piece, 6 feet long. And I blue taped it to one edge, then folded it back, spray adhesived the whole thing, and then laid it on, and used a roller, a paint roller, to smooth it out somewhat. It wasn't a flawless job, as you can see, but it still works. And then I cut another piece or two off the edge of the roll and spray glued them on down there. And then I took a razor and razor cut along the seams. So that's how I got this stuff on. Here's your basic aluminum flashing. This stuff you can cut with scissors. It's really quite thin. But once you get it in a curve like this, it's actually reasonably rigid if you curve it on a framework. So go down to the lumber yard, say on a 50-foot roll of aluminum flashing. This is the stuff. Now, some details on the Mark I construction. Some things I forgot to say while I was outside. The threads on these threaded adapters are not that deep, so I had to countersink into the 1/2-inch plywood. I drilled a hole just the right side for the threads, and then I first I drilled a countersinking hole, an inch or so in diameter, and then I drilled through the center of that for the threads, and then I could put the ring nut on and have it flush. So that's why the glue is important, because it's actually pretty thin right in there. Now, my memory failed me, surprise, and the length of the EMT going in between these two things was actually 56. Now, these space blankets or survival blankets, whatever you want to call them, are pretty standard size, and one dimension is right around something like 59 inches. I mean, it's supposed to be 5 feet, 60 inches, but it always comes up a little bit short. So 56 plus 2 half-inch thicknesses, 57, and then some here for some overlap, you know, it's 58 or 59. You can see that this edge of this is a little bit segmented. That's because I did points every 4 inches, and I'll explain how I did that. But for the Mark II and Mark III, I did them every 2 inches or so. Wear nitrile gloves when you're using that Gorilla Glue stuff, because you'll get brown stains on your fingers that will not come off until you wear your skin out. Let's see, aside from that, frame this up, lay it down so it's a trough like this on the floor, and find the middle, measure the middle of the blanket, make a mark, and line that up with the center hole there, and stretch it across the middle first. Put the glue on, stretch it, staple it, and then work your way out from the center to the edges. Okay, next piece of material. This is the Mark II template, and I recommend that when you're making one of these, you cut out a template, sand it, get it pretty nice and smooth, and then you can just draw around it and do, you know, multiple other parabolas. Now this is the Mark II. It's 3.5 inches wide, so that a 2x4 can sit on it right there, right there, right there. And I ended up drilling holes, you know, there and there. This is not, as long as they're all in the same place, it's not vital whether it's in here or out there. I mean, you don't want it like right here, but somewhere out towards the end, 3/8 inch. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, all these lines across. What I did is I started at the edge of a piece of plywood and measured up. Well, first I measured off segments, and with a square, carpenter's square, drew lines up, and then I measured up those lines certain amounts to make the parabola. And I'll have a list of those dimensions for you. So this is the Mark II for 2x4s. And then we're going to get into sort of computery stuff here. There's the Mark 3.0, and then there's the Mark 3.1. So this is the Mark 3.0, where I said, look, I can do this with half of a 2x4, 1 3/4. So yeah, I can get like 14 of these out of a sheet of plywood. Special note, start up in the corner of the sheet of plywood with this right up in there, up in the corner, and mark one out, and then tuck one inside that, and inside that, and inside that, and it'll slowly work its way down until this corner basically hits that side of the piece of plywood. That's how you get the most out of it. And then you'll be able to put another 2 up in that corner. But after cutting the actual parabola side, the inside of it, and then cutting the outside with the jigsaw, I thought to myself, you know, getting a whole bunch of pieces like this, I thought, why? Why cut this off? It's just more material. The parabola will never be affected by it. So we got Mark 3.1, where you can see there's the back line of it at 1.3 inches, and I just left the sort of the inside of the previous parabola, that material right there, and it's just a little added thickness there, a little more rigidity. Another material note, I cut these out of CDX plywood, the Mark 3s. But what I found is that, no surprise, CDX is not only less smooth on the surface, it's a little cruder in terms of the actual laminates. So I had at the end of one break off and I had to glue it and patch it and like that. I would say spend the extra money and get the AC plywood, and that will serve you well in terms of cutting narrow strips out of the plywood. It's also a smoother surface to glue on, but spend the extra 20 bucks, get the AC. So I guess that's the material issues of it. I mean, if you've got a table saw or a skill saw, circular saw, you can split a 2x4 and cut it into 19-inch lengths. You got a jigsaw, you can cut this out. But definitely make a pattern, smooth the pattern up, say, mark on it, pattern, do not use, and that'll make it a lot easier to just mark out a whole bunch of these. So there's the material question. If you have any other questions about how these things were put together or materials, ask in the comments. I'll look through and answer them. All right? Well, get out there and get building and get conversing in semi-warmth. All right? Thanks.